everybody, welcome to episode 2 of Pedal Pushers. We're back. I'm Zach.
I'm Matthew. Let's go!
Yes, episode 2. So, we got the rundown here, Matthew. You set this up.
Oh, okay, yeah. So, this is a topic that I've wanted to discuss with you for a long time.
Okay.
I call it component indifference.
What does that mean?
Well, is that not a common term for? Is that not a common term for everybody?
Component indifference.
So what I mean by that is that I'm always fascinated with sort of the level of knowledge that you need to have in order to be, in this industry, being a builder. But what translates that? How does that translate to being a consumer? So for me, I've been a pedal consumer my whole life, and now I'm learning all about the components.
Right.
And I realized how little I knew about anything. And as I talked about on last week's show, that I am the rube in the room. We're making shirts already. I got to have t-shirt ideas. But the point is that I was never choosing anything based on the components. I choose it based on, well, does that look cool? Does it sound good? Is it a manufacturer or builder that I like? All those things. But I didn't know anything about germanium or transistors or LEDs or true bypass. Yes, because it's a meme or a joke, kind of a thing.
Right. Yeah.
But so I got to thinking. As I've started working here, I've been here 3 months now, and I ask you a million questions every day about this stuff. Like, I thought it'd be a good topic to kind of discuss. Like, how much do consumers, how much do the pedal buying public need to know? Right. What is helpful for them to know based on maybe how their playing style is and what's good for like combinations of guitars and amps. And then as a builder, like how you think about components as far as like, hey, you have to use X, Y, or Z to make this sound good or this pedal sound good. So I thought it was kind of an interesting topic for a podcast.
Sure. Yeah.
And you guys can prove me right or wrong if you're still listening. So.
Well, it's funny, like these things, like talking about components. I mean, as I've grown in this industry, one of the things I've learned is where to really put my focus.
Yes.
And in the beginning, we all kind of lived, and I think it was just, this point in the internet, we all lived in forums.
Yes.
And the only way we garnered any knowledge, unless we had formal education, was just from reading other people's opinions. And so your first bullet point here is how much do we need to know? And I think the most important thing that we have to you have to take into consideration when it comes to anything is just the sound.
Yes.
And that the parts on the board, I don't want to say they don't matter.
Is it a means to an end?
Yeah. I mean,
sort of thing. Like, it doesn't actually matter at the end of the day as long as it sounds good.
I mean, there are parts that do matter, but it's funny, like when people get so hung up on like, oh, does it have through hole, or is it like an NOS this or that, or like, a surface mount or whatever. The things that I'm more concerned about when I look at pedals, like if I were to see a gut shot of a pedal, I would go, oh man, those jacks are really cheap. Or
because I have noticed you talk about that, the jacks and the
foot switch,
the 9-volt connector thingamabobber. See,
all those
super knowledgeable over here. But you I have noticed that you've said that before about certain pedals. You go like, oh, they cheaped out on X, Y, or Z. Not naming any names. No. There's a million pedals out there, but that is. So you're talking about there's still a quality component here because you want the pedal to last, and you want it to be robust, and you want it to be, it's a forever thing. You want to sell something that people could have, indefinitely.
Yeah,
forever.
And it's funny because we'll get to all the board related parts in a second.
Yeah.
But I think as I've grown as a builder, that those things have mattered the most, because when you look at something like, let's take Joyo, for example. Joyo's still around. They still the import pedal line. They made they just made clones of everything, and replace Joyo with X name here. Any import. I want to say rip-off pedals,
mass produced.
No, not mass produced.
Not mass produced,
but just unabashed clones.
Yeah.
Or people that make direct copies of there's so many fake full tone OCDs or whatever that say full tone OCD, but the thing that separates those, I think, more often than not from the real production pedal is the hardware.
Well, you'll point out to me when it's even a different washer.
Yeah, well, the washer is is important to me.
I know it is because you'll bring it up.
But it's funny. Like the pots, the jacks, the foot switch, and then the wire in those pedals are the things that are they're gonna give you more trouble, more than any surface mount part, more than any crappy resistor or op amp choice. And all that is kind of moot, because if you can't let your signal flow to the circuit board and to the foot switch and to the power jack, then nothing matters. But I think when it comes back to talking about components on a board, we get, there are, it's kind of a hard line in the sand for either people are pure devotees to through hole, and that whole philosophy that it all has to be, big parts or whatever, the way it was.
Yeah.
And then there's people that like us now that use mostly surface mount.
Yes.
And it's a hybrid. A lot of things are a lot of capacitors are still through hole when necessary. But the thing that I've learned through doing this is that the most important part of all of it is just how you lay out your signal and your layout on the circuit board itself, and that anything can work in lieu of another part so long as you tune it and pay attention to how, use your ears, and if you have to, use like an oscilloscope to see how the wave changes. But it's so frustrating for me to see people that bash on one or the other build method when ultimately we're consuming most of these things with a phone that is, I don't know how many millions of transistors are in an iPhone, like all these things that are literally microscopic.
Yeah.
We make music on a computer that is, I don't know. To me, it's like, if it makes you enjoy what you're doing, that's the only thing that matters.
Yeah. And I think that to me has always been my place in all this, which is just, does this pedal sound good to me? And does it bring me joy? And do I put it on my board, and does it inspire me to play better? So I've never gotten, or definitely tried not to get caught up in anything where you say, well, this thing sounds good, but it's not made, I mean, I would hope that nobody would actually do that. And, but you
people
see
do it all the time.
You see it all the time. And
Yeah.
it's a very strange thing where it's like, now I understand if you're sort of you have a starting point, and then you're like, okay, I'm looking for something that's made a certain way and has certain components, and then I'm gonna filter everything else out, and I'm gonna just focus on those. I'm gonna buy the one that sounds the best in there. And so that, if that's a philosophy, that's fine, but you're cutting yourself off from lots of neat stuff.
Yeah.
If you do that, and then what you're also doing is that you're putting sort of an unrealistic expectation on what is even out there, because if you're letting the builder sort of just use whatever they want, that's where you're going to come up with new stuff that's really neat.
Yeah. And I think I think this myth of through hole is better than surface mount, which is ultimately, I think, what we're kind of talking about here.
Yes.
Is perpetuated by the people who are building things with through hole parts and using that that's a selling point.
Yeah.
That's another bullet point on,
So would
descriptor.
you accuse them of being cynical? It's for profit?
Well, no, I think a lot of, because I was the same way when I started building, and I think the only reason I changed my mind is because I remember doing this. I took the Golden Fleece and the Herculean, because those circuits are simple enough for me to not get, it was simple enough for me to translate one-to-one and literally take the same component location, the same type of part, and just swap it from surface or through hole to surface. And I did that.
Yes.
And the first one I did was a Golden Fleece, and I plugged it up, and I was like, well, there's less noise. It's a little louder.
Okay.
And I think it sounds better. And so we A-B'd it. Morgan and I sat there and played it. And Morgan, despite not being she's a great singer and she does play guitar, she doesn't claim to be a guitarist, but she has a good ear.
Yeah.
And she was like, that one sounds better. And I didn't tell her which one, and it was a surface mount. And then we did the same thing with the Herc, which is this dynamic overdrive thing that I was just shocked. And I did another experiment too, where I bought the literal cheapest through-hole components.
Mm-hmm.
I bought the cheapest resistors, the cheapest caps.
Mm-hmm.
I bought the nicest, and then I made one surface, and they basically all sounded the same.
Yeah.
Because it's the layout and those choices. Now, there is like some things to consider with like really high gain circuits, fuzz circuits,
mm-hmm.
that surface mount components can and you've heard this.
Yes.
In some of my prototypes, they can like whistle and have feedback because the signal lines, if they're too close together, like have crosstalk. They'll bleed into each other. And that is bad because that can cause oscillation, all sorts of weird stuff. But it's, again, that's something you solve in the layout.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's where you're at. Is that it's the layout is really where it matters.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, it's how good it sounds. So
and there are some funny things that can happen. Like we heard a pedal that when you knocked the pedal, that you kind of heard it pinging.
Uh-huh.
And that was probably a cap. That was probably just not the best cap was on that pedal, because sometimes capacitors can actually be microphonic.
Yeah.
But like unless you're like doing that to your pedal,
I don't know. Somebody will come up with a good way to turn that into something cool. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Send that to Johnny Greenwood or something.
I think, and these are things like so many of us, like when we're playing guitar, we're just like sitting on, in the floor of our bedroom or our jam space, and we're listening like so intently to every little thing that you would never ever hear if you have anyone else playing with you. So
I mean, being in this industry for a long time and working in pickups with Lawler,
right,
that was a huge thing where people were, it had to be this magnet, it had to be this wire, it had to be scatter wound, all that stuff. And so I went through all of that before. So, I went through that baptism where I started to understand where people were coming from, and then trying to, sort of combat those myths. And then, I started working over at Novo and guitars, and it was the same thing, depending on what you're using. And so this is just like, it's my third stop in the industry where it's like, I got to learn all about the things that people think are important, and then acknowledging that, right? Because I truly believe, this is always like it's an old, sort of maxim, but I do believe the customer is always right.
Right.
Because if they don't, they're right, because if they don't want it, they're not going to buy it. So that makes them right. Not that the take or the opinion is necessarily correct. They're correct in saying I don't want that.
Yeah.
And that is always correct. And so when we're putting together, pedals, and you're looking at marketing your stuff, like that's what I was kind of wondering. It's like, what's a good middle ground from like leading sort of with like how the pedal's built and the components versus like, hey, just play it.
Right.
And have it sound like, because there's some, like you said, builders that are very much like upfront, and it's like a selling point on like how it's put together.
Yeah. And then,
and that's very important in like the guitar world, because people want to know there's people with their hands on them and they're doing certain things. And then it's different. It's pedals, right?
Yeah.
It's a slightly different thing. So how much do you sort of, when you're coming up with stuff, like you think about that sort of thing, or it's like I'm building a pedal, I'm prototyping it. How much am I thinking about the end, sort of like how am I going to incorporate some of the technical parts in the sales pitch for the pedal?
I don't think about it at all.
Ever.
No, I mean, like it depends on the goal of the pedal. Like if we're doing a Fuzz Face, if we're doing, like a tone bender or something that's supposed to be.
So you have to kind of use some of the components that they used. Or do you feel like I'm making a Fuzz Face, I'm going to make it sound like the best Fuzz Face ever, and I don't actually care what components I use as long as the sound is where I want to go with it?
I mean, for me personally,
yes,
I don't care about those vintage new old stock parts. I don't care about any of that because those things are not consistent. So like I'm thinking about the end goal of the sound, but ultimately when you're and this is something that I want to slowly move away from with Mythos and not do so many just outright clones for like, the things that really truly speak to me as a guitarist, and like, I know the inevitability of it. Like I enjoy so many classic circuits, and I'm not saying we won't make any of those. Of course we will. But like when you're paying homage to these classic circuits, that's going to be the first question that everyone asks. Like, oh, is it 3-hole? Oh, is it Germanium? Oh, is it, this or that? And telling someone, hey, that does not matter, it's really hard to break through.
Because it might, and that's what I mean by the customer's always right. If it matters to them, then, you know, trying to convince somebody of that, it's like, who really cares? Right. That's a very hard thing to do. And if that's what makes them happy is vintage component hunting and thinking about it that way, I get it. But there is still, it's like, I say, who cares? But I'm still like, well, it's my job to sell Mythos pedals.
Right.
And I would like to think about it in a way where it's like, there is, you know, the tone, the end result tone is what matters. Mm-hmm. So the pedal I would bring up in this this example would be the Cestus.
Yeah.
Right. So the Cestus is a treble booster, and it's based off the
Rangemaster.
And the Rangemaster uses
Germanium.
And the Cestus uses
silicon.
So take me through that a little bit.
So when we were developing the Sus Mario set for RJ, the first thing he said was, I like the overdrive, I like the delay, I want a Rangemaster.
Great idea.
And I was like, cool. But I said, I can't do Germanium because I don't want to have to sort through the number of transistors. I don't like, there's not an easy way to buy them. There are some companies that are making new Germanium, and let that be a warning to anyone that's buying replica, like vintage style fuzz units. A lot of people say, hey, this is new old stock, this is original, and they might not be. If they look new and shiny, they're probably new and shiny. So we had fortunately bought a bunch of silicon transistors on eBay because I'm constantly looking.
Yes.
And I got, I don't know, like 3,000 of these military spec transistors. And all I did was take the Rangemaster circuit, which is a positive ground. Like if you know, you just flip the leads on a battery terminal. And I flip-flopped everything so it would be a negative ground. I threw that transistor in there and it worked. And it sounded really good. And
that of course is the key there. And I think it's so what would you say to people that maybe would be skeptical of it or don't really want to try it because it's not the original circuit?
I think the thing that we learned is that, I mean, and it's tweaked. It's not exactly a one-to-one, like, you know.
Yeah, because we're not trying to do that here.
No. I mean, like, I want it to reflect, I mean, initially it was reflect RJ's guitar playing sensibilities and mine. But I want it to be hyper consistent and just be musical and serve a purpose that works for more than just like the Rangemaster in its original state is a very niche pedal. Doesn't work into a clean amp really at all. It does a great sound and it sounds very cool, but they're wildly inconsistent. So we were trying to remedy both those things, work for more stuff and be consistent. So I think to people that would turn their nose up at the fact that it's silicon need to just like listen to the videos and the samples that we've put out there and know that there's no smoke and mirrors. It's literally the recording. It's not being processed or anything after the fact. That's how it sounds. And it like you have to, there's like a trust thing that you have to have with a builder to know that they're not trying to pull the wool over their eyes or your eyes.
Yeah, I mean, we're upfront that it's what's in it.
Yeah.
So we're not trying to say anything different.
And it's mostly surface mount. There's like maybe 2 electrolytic capacitors that are not in the signal path that are through hole. Yeah. So it's like the audio path is all surface, but in that it's just wildly consistent. If you buy one and buy another one, they're probably going to sound 95% the same because the transistors vary. But it's so hard to kind of get over people's conception of what is a germanium sound or a silicon sound. It doesn't exist.
Well, that is another, I don't think I put that down as a bullet point, but that is another part of this that, you know, and I think that's where I come in when I say my component indifference is there was never any hangups. I think the fuzz world is probably the one where it seems to be the most, where I would see like those words pop up when I would be shopping, but they would just go in one ear and right out the other because I'm like, I am not going to take the time to learn what this is because I just want to hear it. And then it doesn't matter. But then people might say, well, I prefer blank
Right.
Like, and that's fine, right? But you don't. It's not. There's so much more to the circuit, and then the cables and the amp and the guitar, and then you're playing that. So saying something as simple as that you like a component is a little bit like, you know, there's more application to it than just that.
Oh yeah, and the like. Now, okay, if you take a germanium transistor and a silicon transistor, let's say like you have a Fuzz Face, and they made a PNP silicon transistor, so that's like a positive ground transistor, and you took the classic Fuzz Face and you plugged them in. You did a germanium build, and then you unplugged those germanium ones with a socket and put in a silicon. They would sound different, but that's because, I mean, it does have a different construction, but it's the gain and stuff that those transistors have. And I feel like in my gut that if you didn't tell someone what was the transistor in a traditional fuzz, most people probably wouldn't guess it right.
They couldn't hear that difference and say like, oh, that sounds blank.
And you can tune a circuit. Like the Fuzz Face is so simple. It's got like, I don't know, like 10 parts or something. It doesn't have hardly any parts. You can tune it. You can adjust it, because in being so simple, everything matters. So if you think, oh, germanium's always like woolly and it kind of like this like really compressed attack, and silicon's so spitty and like immediate, you know, you can take the silicon and make it woolly and compressed. You can take germanium and give it more of an immediacy, and make it less woolly with just a few parts that you change. So, you know, I don't know. You had a bullet point on here, is ignorance bliss, and I think it totally is.
Well, I'd like to think that like that was my life for so long, and you've ruined that by employing me. No, but I think that is what I was going to say. Like, I think it's ignorance is bliss, but this is the sort of the transition here to the next part, which is one of the things that's been very beneficial for me working here is you listening to me play guitar and being able to sort of like clue me in a little bit more on sort of the inner workings of things and recommending stuff to me, and then being able to sort of explain why I think this will work. And so I'm not saying that that's 100% tied to components, because I think you, as you said, you could take any components and make them into something that works, but having a little bit more knowledge about like why I'm like, how come I don't like this? But then you're like, try this. And you're like, oh, okay. Well, that sounds good. There is like, you know, sort of I feel like a middle ground there where you can kind of like, it's not necessarily components, but you understand what the pedal is trying to do, and understanding a little bit more about the guts. And the terms all you know, that you bring up a lot is in that vein would be stuff like soft clipping and hard clipping, and like that is something I wanted to dive into a little bit more, and I hadn't really even asked you yet. We'll just do it live on the show. Is it like, you know, how much of that has to do with the components, or is that specific components, or is that more just the overall build of the pedal on how that ends up?
Yeah, that's just the build. Like you can clip with so many different components that it doesn't really, that part doesn't matter, but where they are in the circuit and how they clip the waveform really will change, I think, how you attack the instrument and your perception of the sound as it's coming through the amp. Because like a tube screamer famously is soft clipped, and everyone says like, oh, you can hear the clean signal coming through, and that's not true. There's no blend circuit on a tube screamer. It's just soft clipping retains more of that characteristic because it's just, it takes the wave, and like it's kind of easier to understand with hard clipping. If you think of like a wave sine or a sine wave, and hard clipping is like if you just literally chopped off the top and the bottom of the wave, and it had like kind of right angles, and a lot of pedals have that. The Airlane Drive has that. The DoD 250 has that. The Klon, the Mjolnir has that. And when you crank the gain, it's kind of harsh. It's a bit more. It's a more abrasive sound. But in that you have an aggression and a more distorted sound that you don't really get with soft clipping. And soft clipping, which is the tube screamer, the blues breaker, those sort of things, they just have a bit of a smoother feel. And in that, you usually get more of the quote unquote transparent overdrive sounds. And all of that is kind of moot. But like when you look at most of those circuits that use that or use that terminology, it's usually a soft clipper.
Yeah.
Because it feels to me more natural. And that's not even getting into symmetrical clipping and asymmetrical clipping, which is kind of like, I feel like that would be an episode.
That feels like
I think
we just ventured into another show.
Yeah,
is what it is. Because I only mentioned it more in the idea of the ignorance.
Do the parts matter? And
the indifference or the ignorance part of it, and saying, if I'm completely blind to it, I don't understand. There's a difference between necessarily like not knowing the components, but understanding what the pedal is supposed to be doing.
Yeah,
and like and that's what I was curious about, which is how much of those things have to do with each other. As I kind of go into my journey a little bit more, and I'm trying to figure out sort of like what when you're talking about your playing style and trying to progress and trying to hear the sounds, and then you're like, well, how do I there's so many options, and then you can hear the clips online, but like how do I go like I was saying before about sort of like that filter. If you're filtering via components and you're saying, oh, well, I only want this because this is the sound that I like, versus like doesn't matter what component it is, but this is what the pedal does.
Yeah. And
that's like something like where I think like the soft clipping thing is like you name those pedals and stuff that I've never really like played very much.
Right.
You know what I mean? I think I've only gotten hard clipping, but I play so aggressively. I think I need to introduce some soft clipping into my life.
Well, I think we tried some pedals in here, and
yes, we
I
did.
thought it definitely kind of smoothed out your attack and like how the guitar, because like we can both play your rig and sound
completely different,
remarkably different.
Yeah.
And that's more than just our hands and stuff too, but it's interesting, like, and that's something that I think a lot of people go through. Because on your list you have the top 5 biggest component myths.
I do have that. We were going to get to that. I wanted to get to that at the end, but if you're ready to jump into that.
One thing that I think, and we can add this to the list, but so often, so many of us, myself included, there have been so many times where I said, "Oh, I don't like that sort of thing. I don't like silicon. I don't like germanium. I don't like hard clippers. I don't like."
I mean, just straight up, I don't like tube screamers.
Yeah, I don't
like blues driver.
And so many people will kind of die on that hill when, like when you've been playing guitar for as long as like you and I have been playing guitar, when you have like 20 plus years experience playing something. Like I just recently fell back in love with the DOD 250. I historically always hated that circuit. Every time I tried it, I was like, this just kind of sucks. Like, why? In the Distortion Plus, the same way.
Yeah.
And then recently, we got one. At the Novo shop. You got a Distortion Plus.
We did.
And like, we dimed like the amp and used it. And like, oh, okay. I had never done that. And finally understanding why those things
you just
exist.
hit on a big thing for me. And, this show's already going off the rails for exactly what I want to talk about. But that's the point, is the more... sort of situationalness that pedals can kind of fall into, versus like if you're sitting here and I've got a Dr. C Carmen Gia right here and it's a loud fucking amp. Yeah. There's my F word for the show. And the problem with it is that there's only a certain sort of volume you're actually going to get that thing at if you're playing here in an office park. And if you're trying every pedal through that, well, there's a specific sound that's going to sound, a specific tone that's going to work really well with that. I mean, it takes pedals well, but you got that thing at 9 o'clock and there's certain stuff that's going to sound good. The Airlane Drive kind of doesn't sound that good.
No.
Like that, right? Yeah. Because it needs to cook a little bit and it's hard clipping, and I'm learning these things.
Yeah.
And then, but if you walk over into your office and we're playing a Soldano, or if we're playing the 2-Rock, or if we're playing, and I think that is sort of, as you're saying, it's like Distortion Plus, like crank the amp and then hit that with it. Well, that's what the boys back in the day did.
I know.
Because that's what they had. They had their Marshalls,
right?
Or they had a Fender Twin, just crank to hell, and then they put And it's like, if we're not doing that very often, if you're at home right now, which I've got a 5-watt Benson at home,
Right.
and if that's what you're plugging your stuff into, well, there's certain pedals that are going to work really well with that, and certain stuff that's not. And I think that is a big part of this when you're talking about the components not necessarily mattering, because there's so many other factors in there, and then everything can sound, no matter what you do, everything can sound good in context with the right the right thing. And that's another kind of thing where I'm like, oh my God.
There are definitely like circuits that you can know, like this is part of how I play guitar. But I think so often we kind of get tunnel vision in those things, and you have your blinders on to every other style of circuit. And there's like, I don't know, we harp on like the same like schematics and stuff, you know, so often. It's like way more out there exists than the Tube Screamer, the Klon, the Blues Breaker, the, you know,
there's a lot of stuff.
250. So I don't know, but yeah, it's an interesting thing that I think people have to remember to not put as much stock in all of those the things that ultimately, like if you're playing and just enjoying what you're doing, nothing.
It does not matter what you got.
To me, and again, that circles back to the first thing I said. The only thing that matters is it going to work every time you plug it in, and that's the jacks. The foot switch, like those things. If there's a ribbon cable inside it, like make sure it's like good stuff. Other than that, I just
play.
Turn it up and play it.
Yeah, and then that's sort of where I'm like, okay, as a company, I'm trying to sell things, Zach. Okay, so if we're right there, play everything. It's like you can't play everything. So it's like figuring out how much knowledge you want to have and what the important part about it is. And if you know it's a company that's reputable, that's making good stuff, so their components are good. Yeah. And that's what we hope that we're offering to people out there, is that we're making pedals with really good components. And then finding a way to explain what we're doing there with enough components that if people are interested in that, or if we're going to be upfront with how the pedal is built and sort of what it's based on. You know, the Cestus being an example, you kind of have to point out that it's silicon, because people are going to wonder what it is based off the circuit. So you're going to have to bring that up once in a while, but then sort of figuring out how do I explain to people so they go like, oh, that's something that I should try. Yeah. Because that sounds like something that would be interesting to me. And it's easy to do that when it's like, if you already know that you like or don't like Tube Screamers, and you say, well, this is a Plumes. Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, Earthquaker's cool. Right. It's a cool box, and I'm cool with Tube Screamers, so I'm going to check that out. Sure. Versus, something that's more original or more like, what is that supposed to sound like? Mm-hmm. And a good example of that is that I never in a million years would have been a Klon guy. Yeah. And I say that it's just funny, kind of coming into your world, that's a big deal, but it would never even enter the lexicon for me. Right. Yeah. Because I'm a dirty rock and roller. Uh huh. And
they use Klons.
I'm not saying they don't use Klons. I'm saying is that it's just sort of like, it always had felt a little bit more boutique-y and gear page. And then
it's not punk rock at all.
No, not at all. And so I never really thought about it in that way, because it never really entered any space that I was in when I was buying pedals. And then when we became friends, and then we're working together and all this stuff, and I finally got one, and I love it. Yeah. I absolutely love it. And that's cool. a good example of like maybe thinking something is that's a John Mayer pedal. Right. And I'll play like that. And then I get it, and I'm like, it's just a great pedal. Mm-hmm. It just sounds really good. Yeah. And that's all that matters, is that I get it, and it just gives me that sizzle that I like. Yeah. And that's a good example of like, so how would you, it's like how do you make people sort of break those barriers down and say like, I gotta try this. It doesn't matter what's inside. I'm trying to get you to like how would you have like sold me on the Mjolnir based on my playing style and then what it's supposed to do? It worked because I wanted the Summer Vibes one to look cool. Yeah, so I finally got one.
I mean, that's a big part of it. It has to look cool.
I know.
But that's a hard thing. Like selling something to someone who already has like a preconceived notion of what it is they like and don't like. Yeah. That's definitely a hard thing. But I think for me, and the reason that I've put so much of myself into Mythos and everything is like, you have just like, I don't know. I think I have a pretty good sound. And
yes, you do.
And I have a very specific style. But if you walked in my office right now and said, Zach, get a gnarly 70s punk rock tone, I could get it in a minute.
Yeah.
And so like just trust that. I think that's the one thing is like we trust the builders to not steer us wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And like we have open lines of communication with Mythos. Like if you ever have a question about anything, if you email customer service, it goes to me.
Yes.
So like I'll answer the questions, but I think, just trust that these like whoever you're wanting to buy stuff from, if their philosophies, if their personalities like appeal to you, I feel like all their pedals are going to reflect that.
Yeah.
And the people that I know, like Nick at Wonder Effects, he like was a punk rock dude, and he makes pedals that to me are very punk rock. And when you play them, like they work for me, but when I play more in his style, it's like, oh, I get what he's trying to do with this.
Sure. And I think that the biggest one for me outside of, learning about the Mythos stuff was Philippe over Caroline.
Sure.
Because, Philippe and me, as far as, our rock and roll ethos is very similar. And so when he's like, I'm going to make this pedal called the Crom and it's going to do X, Y, and Z, I'm like, there's no way in hell I'm not going to love that thing. And it's never coming off my board because I can do Kill 'Em All Metallica with that thing.
Yeah.
And
it does that really well.
It does that really well. And that's super fun for me. And so, yes, there is a little bit of a trust there. But then if my brain is in that space, that's what I mean by like, I would never have thought about going to the Mjolnir or the Klon. Yeah. And it's like, it's getting our brains outside of that and figuring out like what it's actually, that's what I mean by me opening up to actually learning something and not being hard. Like, I don't give a shit about what, you know what I mean? I like what I like. It's kind of fighting against that ignorance and maybe not having to dive into like, I only like germanium, but more opening myself up to new ideas and new circuits and new pedals because, I'm not sticking with this preconceived notion of what it's supposed to do and who uses it. And that the people that are like very, violently against the Tube Screamer or whatever it is,
Rhett.
like that. Yes. Hi, Rhett. But Big Mac here is not a Tube Screamer guy. And I get that because there's a certain idea of like, well, it's doing something to my tone. I don't need that. That's totally fine.
Yeah. I think too is like we sometimes we write off, like if you were to think of like, okay, I want to check out like what's the deal with this Mjolnir? It's a clone. Oh, this is going to sound like John Mayer or whoever.
Yeah.
Which I don't even like. I don't even think about John Mayer that much when consider those things.
Remember, this is me coming from.
I know.
Yeah.
But I think you kind of have to like look and read the descriptions, and it says like because what does it actually do? Nothing's going to make you sound like John Mayer. So what is the pedal doing? It's like, oh well, it has a lot of output. It has a way of blending in your clean signal, so you have a really pure boost, and you can really divinely control your high end. Oh. That sounds useful.
Well, you're making a really good point here, and I knew I had a point here somewhere, and we just had to find it because that's how this goes sometimes. Is that the question that you have to ask yourself a lot? And I've been selling stuff for a long time, and the best question that anybody can ask me, or the best thought that anybody can have, is that what's going on with your rig that you're not getting?
Yeah.
And that's hard because there's a difference between need and want.
Oh yeah.
And with the pedal world, a lot of it is want because it's fun to buy stuff. It's so much fun to just keep buying everything.
Keep wanting things, folks.
Keep wanting things. But if you need something, then I could say to you, Zach, this is what's happening with my rig. I'm not getting. And you'd be like, Olympus.
Yeah.
You could be like Golden Fleece. You could be recommend another builder that says, oh, that guy does that perfectly. Like, let's go ahead and get that. And that is hard when, like, say, you're me, which I am me, so I can attest to this. Is
crazy.
I know, isn't that great? This is like exception here, where you don't have any needs because there's no gig this weekend,
right?
So I'm not sitting here going like, I really need X, Y, and Z. So it's all want, and I think the best thing you can do as a guitar player is find a way to have a need, right? Whether it's you're recording, you're putting together your own, dubstep album with guitar over it, or you're practicing with your buds, just enough to where there is a need, and then things become a lot clearer.
Yeah,
because when that's not there, it's like you're just gonna get lost because everything sounds great.
Yeah, I mean,
in a lot of ways, everything's gonna sound really good.
There's not much bad gear out.
No,
and it's kind of frustrating.
Yeah.
You know, because there have been a few times where I've played things and go, that's not for me. But in the back of my mind, it's like, I get why this exists.
Well, I think it's been a golden age of gear. I've said that for a while now because it just feels like we have gotten to the point where I don't even think you can be successful at all if your stuff doesn't sound good. Because there's too many clips out there.
I don't know.
I'm like, well, let me get there. Wait, like there's a difference between, you know, I don't think that sounds, but like I understand why people use this and what sounds good out there. It's a pretty high level of stuff.
It's really hard to get a bad sound these days.
It is. So like for me, that's kind of where I go. And I've sort of settled into my middle ground, and the ignorance is bliss idea with gear is that if I push myself to have a project or doing something where I have a need, then things become more clear versus just, I don't know, that looks cool, I'm going to keep buying stuff.
Yeah.
Which is super fun, but it's also frustrating because there's no direction.
Yeah.
And then you're just sort of like grasping at stuff. And I think that's the best thing that anybody can do. And then you can start asking the right questions, and then you can get down to it. And then you can sort of, you know, learn about as much about components as you need to in order to make a good decision about that need.
Yeah, or I mean, like,
or not,
or leave the components up to the builders.
Yeah,
maybe that would be better. Oh,
whoa.
Oh, wait.
Oh.
We got the myths.
Yeah, we got to get to those.
Like we're stretching. This is a long conversation.
I'm sorry,
but let's get to the myths.
Yes, let's do that.
Okay.
The 5 biggest component myths in the pedal industry.
Number 1. Through hole sounds better than the surface mount.
We touched on that. That is not true.
It's not true. They don't. The components, for the most part.
Is there any situation where you say through hole's kind of the best way to go for it, for consistency or sound a certain sound?
Through hole parts. Well, okay. I like the convenience of using capacitors as through hole, but that's more about the ground, like connecting grounds. I do think that through hole capacitors are often slightly darker, sonically, which is cool. But the thing you have to remember is that there are literally every permutation of value in surface mount. So, you know, with components, for example, typically they're like 0.1, 0.15, 0.22, 0.33. You know, for most through hole caps, that's usually like the value. In surface mount, you can have 0.162, 0.187.
Wow.
Or so, I mean, like, and I'm kind of like making up some numbers here, but they subdivide a lot further because you have to be able to change things. And there have been many instances. The Wildwood Mjolnir, for example, every iteration I was trying to find a certain value, and I had to hunt a resistor, a through hole resistor.
Wow. That
was like a really weird value because I was trying to match something in my Klon, and on every schematic, it's like, oh, that can't be right. So I had to like hunt. But in surface mount, you have all these things. So yeah, through hole surface don't sound any different most of the time.
All right, myth number 2.
Through hole is easier to repair than surface mount.
Oh, okay. So we're just taking out through hole.
Everyone
taking it out back and shooting it.
Yeah, please. Get that old
through
yeller
hole is easier.
Piece of crap. No, so yeah, everyone says through hole is easier to fix. I challenge anyone to most surface mount pedals, those parts are small. I will say that. If you have any competence with a soldering iron, and I'm talking like actual skill, if you're a repair person, how about that?
Okay.
And you can't replace a surface mount part in a fraction of a time compared to through hole, then you need to retire.
Wow.
Because it's so easy.
There you go.
You either have you either don't have the right tools, or the failure was so bad that the circuit board burned up, which can happen regardless of the construction method.
Okay.
So yeah, surface mount is very easy to fix.
Great.
You've seen me mod surface mount.
I've seen you do it.
Designs. It's super
because you needed to.
Yeah, and just go
and
flick,
like,
and
then it's boom.
Done.
All right, number 3.
Number 3, biggest component myth. Oh, germanium and silicon. One is inherently better.
Got it.
Not true.
Not true.
Not true. They both have their own sound, but you can make them. You can tweak it, like I said.
Number 4.
NOS parts
NOS parts
are better. Not true. You have to have so many to get the consistency of a modern day production part.
Mm-hmm.
Modern day parts have tighter tolerances, so
Mm-hmm.
you can bank that every pedal will sound the same. Where if you're doing new old stock, you don't. It's a crapshoot.
Yeah.
And then number 5.
Yeah.
Oh man. Trying to think.
I kind of surprised you with this one.
Yeah.
So.
The 5th biggest component myth. I mean, everyone talks about. Well, no, let's see. I was gonna say buffer or true bypass. That doesn't matter.
The true bypass.
That's not component myth.
Yeah, I think we've all settled on that one. That's fine.
Oh, op amps.
Okay.
So the chips in like a tube screamer, for example,
Mm-hmm.
people often say, "Oh, it has the RC4558 chip." It's like, oh, guess what? They don't really sound that different.
Mm-hmm.
They can be slightly different, but if like for the most part you're using the amplifier in a circuit a certain way, as long as it's amplifying, everything around is what makes the sound. It's just amplifying.
Yeah.
So more often than not, if you see people selling a pedal and say, oh, it has, a very expensive Burr Brown op amp and all this stuff, they're just spending extra money on a chip that does the same job as a chip that costs a fraction of that. And it's just for you to spend more money. I hate to say it.
There you go.
There is differences, but at 9 volts in a pedal, I don't think it matters.
There you go. And we will pass those savings on to you. Well, there you go. Thanks for enlightening me.
Well, thanks for picking a fight, I guess. Maybe.
No, it's fun. I think it's a very, like I said, it's an illuminating experience every day, sort of, coming in, being as ignorant as I am, and just sort of no. I mean that, and saying why, right? Like because it's very, because I can come at it with an angle and say why. And I think that the thing that I enjoy most about that process is you can explain these things to me, but also, you're not hung up on anything. You're like, we're just going to make this sound as good as possible. Yeah. And I'm going to get the components that I need to make this sound as good as possible. And, we're not trying to make, clones in that regard, because, you obviously want to make a pedal and you want to make it sound as good as you can, and you want to make it sound as good as you want it to sound. Yeah. And then if you're not hung up on doing it a very specific way, then you can do whatever you want. And that's really enlightening. Yeah. And really illuminating for everybody, and I've been, down that road, like I said before, with Lawler, where, Jason wasn't trying to recreate anything, and people were really hung up on certain things. And he's like, well, I don't care. I was just trying to make pickups sound good.
He literally wrote the book that everyone bought about winding pickups. So
I know.
Trust the guy.
Trust the guy that, and it's like, and trust the fact that in the end, this is him saying, this is what I think sounds good. Right. And that's it. And, that's sort of where we're at right now with a lot of brands, is that it's like, hey, like the person is up front. I mean, you would be a prime example of that, of someone that's like up front about like, hey, this is me, I'm Zach, I make this. Yeah, yeah. And so it's like, it's a trust level. And I think it's good. And this is a big reason why I want to do this podcast, so people could say, kind of peel that back a little bit and say, like, this is how I feel about those kind of things. Yeah. So it's cool.
Yeah. And I just hope that everyone just kind of just focuses on playing guitar and just having fun. Because that, like, I'm on all that Pedal Show Facebook groups, and I read everything. And sometimes I chime in and sometimes I don't. But yeah, I think it's real easy when, you live in that world to get hung up on that stuff. Yeah. But we're doing there's something coming soon, and it would have been, all surface, but I decided to put some like through hole caps in that, because I just thought, oh, this sounds a little better. Hey. And so I'm sure the guys are going to hate me, because now I'm like, hey, remember that one thing we used ages ago? Well, find them and start keeping them on your desk.
There you go. But that is an example of you, no matter what, you'll do what's right. If it turns out that through hole is the right way to go for something, you're going to do it. And I think that's,
I've made mistakes like switching to that. And then it was, I guess whenever I did the last positron collider that looked like the the trap, like that one.
That was like October of 2021.
Yeah. I said I think this will be better with through hole caps, and the poor guys they had to solder all these caps on, and then I compared it to another one that was all surface, and I was like, well, I'll be damned, these sound exactly the same.
And you're like, sorry, buds. Sorry, buds. So anyway, we can all learn, play with sounds.
I feel like we're sitting at the table from the 1989 Batman.
Yeah.
That was the first Batman movie, right? 89?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
the Michael Keaton. Because that long,
Shark Repellent was the first.
Oh, yeah, that's the first one. There's that long dining room table.
Yeah, where they sit when he has dinner with Vicky Vale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like that's what we're
It's a little bit far away, but it's fine. It's fine. When we finally do video, we'll have to get a better table. So.
Or we just get 2 cameras.
Yeah, so you can see how good we look. All right. Well, we went long. I weren't trying to go as long as that, but I'm fascinated by this stuff. So we're trying to come up with some other segments for the show.
Yes.
Those will, manifest themselves as we go. I will try to force things, and we'll see if people actually like them. But, obviously being, guitar players who like to buy things and are always trying to buy things, I thought it would be fun to talk about a little bit about what we're trying to buy and maybe what we're selling.
Right.
In honor of one of our favorite video games of all time.
What are you buying? What are you selling?
What you buying? What you selling? Which the remake is coming out.
I can't wait.
And I'm so excited about it, and they better have not changed the voice actor for that because...
No, I just want to hear it in higher fidelity.
I'm so excited. It's one of my favorites. So, what you buying? What you selling? Zach, why don't you start with you?
Okay, so I just got that Blackstone MOSFET overdrive thing.
You did?
Which
Very
is
cool. That's the vintage guitar classic. I remember seeing that ad constantly and always going like, that thing looks cool, man.
What is it?
What is that? And I should have bought one, but I never did.
Well, now we have one.
We have one.
Yeah, if you don't know, it's 2-foot switches, and then the knobs are really just trimmers. You have to use your thumbnail or a pick to turn them. Yeah. 2 channels. It just is really cool. But the thing that I want to buy.
Yes.
I've been driving to work thinking about our front room, like our future showroom hang space. I think it needs a half stack of some form or another.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I have the PRS Hendrix half stack, the 50 water. I think that's a little too much.
You need a master volume?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Maybe a 2x12 half stack, like a 2x12 turned up vertically. I like that look.
Which I've done with the Carmen.
Yeah,
I've got
I think
a
that's a great look.
It looks very cool.
But yeah, I feel like there needs to be like a definitive drum in the middle, guitar section, bass section.
And something that we could film some stuff if we wanted to. Yeah. I know it's glass out there and it's that front room, and we got to see if the neighbors are around. Yeah. There's a lot of qualifiers before we can jam on that.
Yeah, but I don't know. Now I've got.
Well, the funny part is that's what I'm trying to buy right now too.
Yes.
Which is that I have my 5-watt Benson, my God, I forget, blank on the name of my amp, Nathan Jr.
Oh yeah.
At home, and I've got my 18-watt Carmen.
Was there a Nathan Senior?
No.
Or a Nathan?
I think no. There's just the Nathan. It's based off of a player.
Oh.
There's a player.
That was like
it's like signature amp. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because a lot of his amps have like people names.
Yeah, the Chimera.
Well, yeah, my cousin Rick Chimera.
Dude, Rick Chimera would be a great wrestling name. I would totally go. That guy, that's a world champ material. Rick Chimera. So I'm interested in buying some loud master volume amp. I've been looking at like the Fillmore 50 or maybe a Mark 5.
Yeah.
I went down the boogie territory very quickly.
Well, because like we both love those sounds, and you especially.
Yes, and really I think that I've been.
I'm gonna look on Reverb right now.
Yeah, I've been running from that for a long time. And not running away from it, just like my playing style and the way I grew up. I'm the biggest, Metallica, James Hetfield guy, but I've always wanted to try to get some nuance in my playing, and I like a ton of different sounds. But I think I've got everything else covered by now, and so I think it's time to get beefy. and it's time to get beefy. And I really want to go down that road. The problem is, of course, is that like it's 3 weeks from today.
Oh,
my second child is going to be born.
Yep.
And so I don't have a lot of room at home.
No.
And I also don't have any money because all of that's going to that.
Yeah.
So, it's like I got to sell a few things in order to make that work. And I am probably finally in that mode because I've never really sold anything ever guitar wise. I've never really bought a bunch of stuff except pedals. Right.
Yeah.
But it's time to start, paring down a little bit with that. But I do, and this is kind of goes back to the conversation we just had about components and getting stuck on things. Like, I don't want to, I very much am a buyer who gets stuck on things.
Yeah.
You get an idea in your head, you think that's what's going to be right for me, and I want to play more stuff so I can be surprised and end up with a Bogner Shiva or something.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Those are so good.
I know, but I kind of
gotta go play stuff.
I know.
That's the ultimate.
But that's so
thing.
hard nowadays.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
Because you kind of get stuck on because you have access to so much. We're not going down to the local guitar store anymore and just buying the best amp they've got. Because you can get anything, and so there's option paralysis, and then you get stuck in your head about I think this is what I want.
Yeah.
So
what you want is a Mesa.
I think I do. I know. I'm feeling it. And the options are really good now because they have a lot of variety.
Yeah.
It's not just rectifiers, and they've done a lot of transitioning, over the last 20 years where they've come out with lots of different stuff. And so, they got the California Tweed, they've got the Badlander stuff, they've got all the rectifier stuff, and they've got the Fillmore. I feel like that's the direction I want to go.
Yeah, we need to hit up Cesar. Be like, hey,
Cesar. I'm sure he listens to the show.
I bet he does.
He should. It's a good show. Options in it.
Yeah.
And it was Ace Frehley guitar.
Yeah.
$1,500 because it was 2001, and I'm like, wow, I should have bought that guitar.
Man, oh, see the 73. That's what Aces was.
Yeah.
So our friend Casey Harris has one that looks like Aces and has the star on the headstock and stuff, and it's like, man, that's neat, but I don't know.
Got to pare it down sometimes.
I just have.
You only play one guitar at a time unless you're
Michelangelo Amedio or something.
That's the only person I can think of that was doing that thing.
What are you selling, Matthew?
Let me do a can real quick. I'm very thirsty.
Oh
here.
my God.
It's part of the intro now, so you get the can opening no matter what. But let me move my phone so I don't blow it just in case.
That was okay. It wasn't as good as the.
I tried, man.
The one we got.
The Krogers are better than LaCroix
as far as the level of
fizz. Yes, absolutely. So that was on me that I forgot about the component.
I guess it's on me because I'm the boss because I supply the.
It's a component problem. The LaCroix doesn't have the right amount of fizz for the show. All right. Well, I apologize for everybody for that weak ass fizz right there. No. So what I'm selling right now, I've got a Warmoth Telly.
Yep.
I built that thing in 2011. It's got Lawler specials in it. It's a great guitar. It's got a 6-saddle Callahan bridge. It's got the Planet Waves locking tuners, so it's a little more modern features. I've got the hot dog plate flipped correctly, so the volume is closer. That's how I like it. All right, we'll correct. We can get into an argument about that, but I'm selling that because I just never play it, and it's just kind of sitting around. And then I'm going to move my Randall finally.
The poor Randall.
Yeah, as I talked about wanting to get a louder amp, it served its purpose. It just never inspired me. I like the idea. It's one of the RM50s where you have the preamp modules.
Yep.
I've got a couple different ones. I've got the Blackface. I think I have a Maz 38 is what's in there right now.
Some Dr. Z-esque thing.
And then I had a Bogner Ecstasy for a long time. It sounds good, but it's not all the way there. Yeah, I never played it and said wow. Yeah. Kind of thing. So.
Well, I used to go guitar shopping with my friend Squirrel. And every time I'd plug in a guitar at a guitar store into a Hot Rod DeVille.
Yeah.
He'd look around and be like, God, did they not have any real amps here? I'm sorry that for everyone that loves that amp, I know it's a fine amp.
Shots of fire.
But that's how I think that's probably what you feel with the Randall.
Yeah.
It's it's good, but I need a real amp.
Well, it's that idea of having something that inspires you, that you just hit a chord and it does something and you go, oh, oh, like that's what you want out of an amp, and it was serviceable for me, and I got a good deal on it. Pops worked for US Music, which is Randall Distribution, so I got a good deal on it, and I wanted something loud. It's got 50 watts, but it's too generic.
We have this right here, this Dr. Z KT45. Now that's nice and loud.
It is, yeah, but I think we're talking master volume here. I think it's so loud.
Yeah,
I had a 6545 for a while too.
Yeah, those are loud.
Those are very loud, which was a cool amp. I actually traded that for the Randall with some cash.
I traded. Oh god, that should be an episode. Just like, well, I've undoubtedly traded more shit away than you have.
Well, I went through a lot of amps.
Oh, okay.
And then when I finally got the Randall, I was like, I'm done. I just didn't want to deal with it for a long time. I went through a ton of stuff, and a ton of ideas from like 2000 to 2005. And then I finally said, I'm just going to kind of stick with this for a long time. Mm-hmm. And I did. And now I guess it's just time to dive back in.
Yes.
Time to dive back in.
And we'll save it. I was gonna say.
What?
I was gonna tease something.
What?
I want Mythos.
Oh my god.
To make more YouTube content.
Yeah.
And I want to do a big Nashville Guitar Store tour video.
Yes.
And in that, I want all of us to go and just shop.
Yeah.
So,
and the good part about it, all of us, meaning you and myself
and Mac and Jeff,
is that we all have very different playing styles and very different goals.
Yes.
Right. Where Jeff and Mac are playing out live almost weekly. Mm-hmm. For the two of them, they play a lot, and so they have specific goals. And then you and I, are a little bit more into the okay, we got to have stuff for demo purposes. Yeah. For trying stuff out. All those different things, and I think that would be a really fun experience. Yeah, because I think you'll hit all the points from everybody.
Yeah,
what they're looking for.
I think between all of us, we can cover most sonic ground.
I like that.
Well,
I also like one more thing. I also want to do, because I think it comes back to the pedal talk that we had earlier, is you doing demos on all the amps.
That's happening.
And so do you want this half stack that you're looking for to be a part of that mix, or do you like what you have right now?
No, I like what I have now. I just want something else.
Like, we need something for the front room, and I don't want to move anything that's in my office to the front room.
I love everything in my office. I mean, I could see getting a 2x12 PRS cab. Yeah. And maybe getting the 100-watt Hendrix head. Yeah. I'll call Paul and be like, hey, Paul. So remember when you said you'd build me an amp?
Yeah, I like it. All right, well, there you go. What you buying, what you selling. Good stuff.
Bam.
So, hit us up if you want one.
Yeah.
We're always slanging. All right.
Shoot us a message.
So I did want to mention this because I would really like this to be a part of the show. And we had, we talked about it a little bit on last week's, but I wanted to mention it a little bit more. Tone Help Hotline.
Yeah.
Right. If you go to the Anchor Pedal Pushers page, which is the link that we send out for the show.
It's linked in the Mythos under the About section.
Yes. Then you can go and you can click on this link and you can record a voicemail that we'll hear, and we'll answer it, and we'll play it and answer it on the show. Yeah. And what are we looking for? What kind of questions are we looking for?
I think anything you have questions about Mythos, or questions about your rig, or sounds you're chasing, or maybe not entire episode worthy discussion level questions, but hey, I'm trying to get X sound and I am not sure how to go about it, or I'm really struggling with this part of my setup. How should I fix it? Or I don't know. And anything like that, I think would be.
And to the point is that you've been a huge help for me. Answering very specific questions. And I think that you get some of that stuff on your AMAs on Friday, but we want to be able to dive in a little, it's not a blurb, because you're
it's not 30 seconds on
30
Instagram
seconds.
story.
We can dive in a little bit, maybe not, like you said, whole
maybe
show
two
worthy,
minutes.
but we can go in a little bit further, and it might spark some discussion and some, I always think a good question is something that we all want answered. Right. So it's not just, it could be specific to you, but it might be good for everybody to hear.
Yeah. I think the one thing to avoid is, and the style of question that myself on AMAs and on Dipped and Tone and everything that we get asked a lot is, oh, what do you think about X? Have you tried X, whatever, from new releases? And folks, I very rarely get new stuff.
Yeah.
As far as like every new drop, like the new Strymon pedal, don't have it, don't really want it, and that's okay. But like I'm not a review channel.
You don't want a string orchestra following you wherever you go?
not normally.
There's some people that would be cool for, but yeah.
Yeah.
I see that. But yeah, we don't do that.
No.
So we don't have a Black Mountain Crunch. We don't have the new what else is new that just came out?
The new Strymon.
The new Strymon, new Black Mountain Crunch, whatever it is. If they want to send us these things.
Yeah,
please do.
Nick, are you listening?
Send us. We'll play it. We'll have some fun.
Yeah, I don't know. What other new things? I don't know. And luckily, sometimes we're fortunate enough to have friends that, like Corey Congilio brought some of the PRS pedals by and some of the new SEs. Got to play the SC DGT
and
and 594.
And I've kept up with Caroline's stuff pretty much to a T. I haven't played the new Phaser yet.
Yeah,
but I have most of his new stuff. So, but let's get a little bit more specific to like your tone needs.
Yeah.
That we can
more
help
general
with.
maybe.
That I can, we can help with, and Zach can help with.
You can help.
And I'll just, smile and nod and drink my can.
Yeah.
All right. What else? Last thing I want to do every week, because I think this is fun. We have so much stuff in the works, Zach.
Yeah,
we do. It's
do.
disgusting how much stuff that we have in the works right now.
Mm-hmm. I'm excited.
That is my main job, is to do all the crap so you can just work on the new stuff.
Right.
That is my main job. I want you to be able to focus, get this stuff out. So much cool things. So I thought every week we could tease something.
Yeah.
Just a little tease.
You're calling it the big tease.
Yeah, I know.
Even though he just said the little tease.
I know. Okay, I'll call it the big tease.
I like the big tease.
The big tease. All right. So we've got, I think I mentioned this in a newsletter a couple weeks ago, but we've got 2 exclusive colorways coming out.
Yes.
Very soon. Actually, one of the guys from the store will be here today.
That's right.
And we're going to talk a little bit about it and film a little bit.
Shoot some content.
So let's tease it in the most opaque way possible. Don't give it away.
Can
we do it?
I feel like anything I say is going to be
give it away.
Blatantly obvious.
Yeah.
Well, one of them.
How about we mention the 2 can we mention the 2 pedals?
Yeah.
It's a Chupacabra and an Argonaut.
Yeah.
In new colorways.
Yes.
That's good.
That's it. But they're
very cool.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Potential spam.
Yeah, it's trying to sell me some health insurance.
Ladies and gentlemen, I signed Matthew up on a health insurance thing, and they gave his number to everyone.
Oh my God. So
we
were trying to, when I got brought over here, we were trying to figure out all the health insurance stuff, and we're looking online and doing our research, and man, I just get all day long. I get bombarded. I have to flush my phone down the toilet. That's really the only, I'm pretty sure that's the only solution here. So yes, we don't want to give anything away because we're a couple weeks out here, but it's a Chup and an Argonaut.
Yeah. And I think one of them, they're both super cool, but I think one of them, everyone's going to go, oh yeah.
Oh yeah. So, I definitely, want the Chup.
Yeah.
Because I have an older art Chup, and I'm ready. I want this one very much so.
Yeah. People are I think they're going to, it's going to be so obvious.
Yes.
When they see it, but
they're going to say, how is this not something you have done yet?
Right. Yeah.
That's what they're going to say.
100%.
Well, there you go. There's a show.
That's it. Thanks for listening, guys. Be sure to rate and review the podcast and all the things now.
Yes. I think please send us an email if there's a podcast medium that we're not on. I tried to sign up everything that I could already. I think if there's anything else out there that I missed, please let us know.
Yeah. And feel free to send us any messages or anything about topics that you want to hear us talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So let's do it.
There you go.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Ha!